All right, let's dive in, shall we?
Yeah.
Today, we're all about languages.
Oh, I love this topic.
Me too. It's fascinating. We've got your notes here all about how to become fluent, pulled from pasted text. So we're going to kind of pick those apart and see what really works.
Sounds good.
Seems like you're looking to become a more confident speaker, right? Someone who can just roll off the tongue in another language.
That's the dream for many.
Well, let's make that dream a reality. The notes jump right into practice, which I think is key. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't become fluent just by reading about it, right? You have to actually open your mouth and speak.
Yeah, it's like anything else. The more you do it, the better you get.
Yeah.
But the notes get specific about the type of practice that really makes a difference. What stood out to you?
Well, they talk about daily speaking practice, even if it's just talking to yourself. And honestly, that's something I recommend to all my students.
Talking to yourself in another language. That sounds a little crazy.
It might sound strange, but it really works. Think about it. When you're learning, you're constantly translating in your head. But when you talk to yourself, you're forcing your brain to think directly in that language.
So you're kind of rewiring your brain to think in that new language.
Exactly. Plus, it helps you get comfortable with the sounds of the language, with pronunciation, and with just putting sentences together. It's like a warm-up exercise for your brain.
That's like a mental workout, getting those language muscles flexed. Speaking of working out those muscles, the notes also mention something called shadowing, which I've heard about but haven't actually tried.
Oh, shadowing is fantastic. You basically find a recording of a native speaker and you try to mimic them as closely as possible.
So it's like karaoke, but for language learning.
Exactly. You're not just listening. You're actively trying to reproduce the sounds, the rhythm, the intonation. It really helps you internalize those nuances of the language.
It sounds like it would be particularly helpful for pronunciation. Like, if you're struggling with a specific sound, you can really focus on getting it right.
Exactly. And speaking of pronunciation, the notes mention some great resources like YouTube videos and apps like Forvo and ELSA, which can really help.
Those are good ones. I've used Forvo before to check how native speakers pronounce certain words. It's amazing how many variations there can be, even within one language.
Right. And mastering pronunciation isn't just about sounding fancy or having a perfect accent. It's about being understood. If you can't pronounce words clearly, it doesn't matter how much vocabulary or grammar you know.
That's so true. And pronunciation is about more than just individual sounds, right?
Yeah.
There's also intonation and rhythm, which can be tricky to master.
Definitely. Intonation is like the music of the language. It's how you convey emotion, emphasis, and even sarcasm. It's what makes your speech sound natural and engaging.
It's like the difference between reading a script and actually having a conversation.
Right.
You know, something that really caught my eye in the notes was the idea of thinking in the target language. Do you think that's realistic? Especially for beginners. I mean, isn't it hard enough just to form a sentence?
I know it sounds a little daunting, right? But it's a game changer. Think of it this way. When you start learning to drive, you consciously think about every step, the clutch, the gas, the brake. But as you get more comfortable, it becomes automatic.
Right, you stop thinking about the individual actions and just focus on driving.
Exactly. And the same thing happens with language. In the beginning, you're constantly translating in your head, but as you immerse yourself in the language, thinking directly in that language becomes more natural.
So it's about training your brain to switch its operating system.
Exactly. And there are small things you can do to start. Try describing your surroundings in the target language, even if it's just simple things. The book is on the table, the cat is sleeping, and try to have internal monologues in the target language. Even just thinking, what am I going to eat for lunch in the target language can help.
Those are great tips. I'm going to try that. So we've talked about practice and pronunciation and even thinking in the target language. What about vocabulary? The notes talk about the importance of learning topic-specific words and common phrases.
Yeah, that's a great point. Instead of just memorizing random words, think about the kinds of conversations you want to have and focus on learning vocabulary that's relevant to those topics.
So if you're planning a trip to Italy, focus on travel-related vocabulary. If you're interested in cooking, learn words related to food and recipes.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of learning common phrases. Things like, how are you? Thank you. Excuse me. Those are essential for everyday communication.
Right. It's like having a toolkit of ready-made phrases that you can use in any situation. The notes also mention something called collocations, which I have to admit I wasn't familiar with.
Oh, collocations are fascinating. They're words that naturally go together. Like in English, we say, Heavy rain, not strong rain.
Right. You would say make a photo, you'd say take a photo.
Exactly. Learning collocations makes your speech sound more natural and fluent because you're using words in the way that native speakers do.
It's like having the secret code to unlocking fluency.
Kind of. And speaking of fluency, one thing the notes emphasize is that it's not about perfection. It's about communication, about being able to express yourself and connect with others.
So true. I think sometimes people get so hung up on grammar rules and being perfect that they're afraid to actually speak.
I see that all the time. And it's a shame because mistakes are a natural part of learning. In fact, they're valuable learning opportunities.
I like to think of mistakes as stepping stones on the path to fluency.
Exactly. Don't let the fear of making a mistake hold you back from speaking.
The notes mention some really cool ways to get over that fear and practice speaking, like finding a language partner or joining a conversation club. Have you had an experience with those?
Oh, absolutely. When I was learning Spanish, I joined a conversation group, and it was so helpful. It forced me to step outside of my comfort zone and actually use the language in a real setting. We'd talk about everything from current events to movies to our favorite food.
It's like turning everyday conversations into language learning opportunities. The notes also highlight immersion as a powerful tool. Things like watching movies, listening to podcasts, reading books in the target language.
Immersion is key. It's all about surrounding yourself with the language as much as possible. And the best part is, you can make it fun. Choose content that you actually enjoy, whether it's movies, music, podcasts, or books. You'll be learning without even realizing it.
It's like sneaking in a language workout while you're enjoying your favorite entertainment. And speaking of absorbing the language, the notes emphasize the importance of active listening.
Active listening is crucial. It's not just about passively hearing the words, it's about paying close attention to how native speakers pronounce words, their intonation, the way they phrase things. It's like being a detective, uncovering the secrets of natural speech.
So it's about training your ears much as your mouth.
Precisely.
Now, what about grammar? The notes suggest learning grammar through speaking rather than just memorizing rules. I have to admit that sounds a lot more appealing.
It is. Think of it like learning a sport. You don't master a sport by reading the rule book. You do it by playing the game. You pick up the rules naturally as you go.
So dive in and start playing the language game. Grammar will come naturally as you practice speaking and listening. Finally, the notes emphasize the importance of tracking your progress.
Yes, it's easy to feel like you're not making progress if you don't have a way to measure it. Setting small, achievable goals is a great way to do that.
So instead of saying, I want to be fluent in Spanish, you might say, this week I'm going to have a basic conversation with my language partner, or I'm going to watch a movie without subtitles.
Exactly, and celebrate those small wins. Each one is a step closer to fluency.
I love that. Track those triumphs, celebrate the journey, and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way.
That's the spirit.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from pronunciation and vocabulary to thinking in the target language, and even the importance of having fun with it. It's been a fascinating deep dive into language learning. What stands out to you as the most valuable takeaway? And what's one thing you're going to try first to boost your fluency? Think about it.